Jamaican Prime Minister Andrew Holness has announced a minor cabinet reshuffle effective as of Tuesday this past Tuesday, aiming to enhance the administration's efficiency in delivering policies and programs for the Jamaican people. The move was anticipated, particularly the removal of Robert Morgan from the Ministry of Information, given his resignation as the Jamaica Labour Party's public relations chairman last month. Dr. Dana Morris Dixon has taken over as the new information minister, while also retaining her responsibilities for skills and digital transformation. Additionally, Abka Fitzhenley, a former broadcast journalist who was appointed to the Senate in May 2023, has been named parliamentary secretary in the office of the Prime Minister. The administration reaffirms its commitment to transforming Jamaica into a peaceful, productive, and prosperous nation, as outlined in its 2020 mandate. This morning, we are joined to help us look at this mini reshuffle of the Jamaican cabinet. We're joined by political commentator Dr. Nadeen Spence, our very special guest in the Big Story segment. Good morning, Dr. Spence.
Good morning, Richard B. How are you?
I'm doing very well. I'm happy to have you on the program. And
thanks for asking me. It's a pleasure to be invited.
Yes, and I will tell you, Dr. Spence, that in the Big Story segment, a very important part of this program, you are the first female guest.
Oh.
And it's not by accident; it's by choice. So,
even more honored.
Yes, thank you once again. Let's look at this mini cabinet reshuffle. What would you say, Dr. Spence, are some of the political or potential implications of this cabinet reshuffle on the administration's policy, implementation, and overall governance?
Well, that's a big question. There was a space created in the cabinet when former minister who had responsibility for works, trying to remember his name, the very controversial
Warmington
had to resign because of comments he made post the local government election. So there was a space created in the ministry, and remember the government had announced this very important Sparks program, which is supposed to, from all indications, give them some uplift going into the election. Mm-hmm. So there was no minister assigned to that important works portfolio, and so a space was there. Along with that, it was apparent coming out of the elections as well, and even before, that the communications arm of the government wasn't doing so well, that there was a lack of trust, perhaps in the messenger, that the effectiveness of the message coming from the government was being lost on the people. And thirdly, there are two members of government who made it into the Senate who have particular skills, Dana Morris Dixon and Abka Fitzhenley. Dana already has a ministry, and typically information is twinned with a ministry that has resources, people and otherwise. And one of the things you would have noticed about Robert Morgan is that his ministry was a standalone ministry as the Ministry of Information, operating out of the office of the Prime Minister, which itself is a ministry. Mm-hmm. But, he was just operating out of the office of the PM. So I think if you look at the need for all of those things, for a minister to ensure that the Spark program is landed and is effective and is delivering what it says it should do in terms of resuscitation of roads. The Prime Minister would have spoken during the post the elections that people are not just content with highways and being fixed, which join or constructed, which join parishes and makes it more efficient to travel across the country, but people want to see the road to their doorways fixed. That's an important ask that Jamaicans apparently had indicated. And as well, that this young minister, Dana Dixon, who is very talented in respect of technology and has been asked to lead the upskilling of the workforce on matters of technology primarily, that, perhaps she brings a new kind of reality to communications, but that she's also a trusted face. She's a charming woman. When she speaks, people listens to her. She comes with a lot of competence. That Robert Morgan, who is young and energetic and seemed to have a knack for being on the ground and engaging people, was perhaps not doing so well in a ministry, sitting at a desk, and needed to be at a ministry where he would be more, active and engaged in the day-to-day running of things. And that Dana as well is being supported by a talented communicator, Abka Fitzhenley, who knows his way around messaging and spinning narratives. So I think all in all, I think what the government is showing is that some imperatives of theirs around works and communications are being met by this reshuffle.
Can one interpret from this move by the Prime Minister that Dr. Dana Morris Dixon and Abka Fitzhenley are seen as, shall we say, bright stars for the future?
They are. I think the fact that they got into the Senate tells you that the Prime Minister was playing perhaps the long game and was looking for a way to incorporate them in the mainstream communication agenda of the government. I think Andrew Holness is an observer. I think he notices where things are not going right. I think he doesn't rush. I think he waits and he sits and waits for an opportunity so as to cause the least harm. And I think in this case, he would have been looking for a space to include them in the cabinet, but he did not want to, I think, ruffle feathers too much. And I think both of their prowess prior to coming into the government was quite known. We know that Dr. Morris Dixon was regarded as a brilliant social scientist before. We know that Abka had a reputation in Jamaica for going after the story and getting the message across. Those things we knew before they got into the government. So the fact that he can spot talent and he can put it to use is also implicated in that, not just that he has, and also that he has big plans for them going forward.
And no doubt the Prime Minister is thinking, as you say, in the long term. Elections are due by next year, and I'm sure that he would want to be strong in terms of how he communicates his plans and so on with the Jamaican population. Now, I wanted to focus a little bit more on Robert Morgan, though. What, Dr. Spence, would you say are the political consequences of Robert Morgan's removal from the Ministry of Information, particularly given his previous comments on starving opposition councillors of public funds? Because we have heard persons even bringing that up recently. What are your thoughts on that?
My own evaluation of Robert Morgan's career is that he was the rising communication star for the JLP, and with the JLP in its first term, his strategy worked, but when you are in your second term and heading to a wanting to win a third term, there are different, you're not new, you're not fresh anymore. People have seen your strategies. People know how you work, and so your opposition can upend your strategy because they can anticipate your moves. That's one. Secondly, if they can anticipate your moves, then it means that some of your messaging is lost on some of the people. And as well, it means that you have to come up with a strategy that is new and fresh. You can't go with the same thing. The question is, can somebody who has a particular presence remake themselves so that their messaging seems fresh and new? But not only that, being the JLP point person on communication, or one of the point persons on communication, is one thing. But transitioning to a government minister for information is something else. And I think even though you would have seen in the weekly press briefings, post-cabinet press briefings, that he perhaps was trying to present another face, I don't think those who carried the message from him were convinced that he wasn't just a JLP operative, that he was now legitimate government minister who, had the kind of presence and the the candor to present a message that didn't seem to be coming from the JLP. And I think that was perhaps his biggest downfall, right? Because he didn't transition well from JLP information star to government information minister. And so the government's message didn't get carried. That's one. But I think information minister is a full minister, you know. And so all of the other responsibilities of ministries in terms of, you know, legislative changes, ensuring policy and so on, all of those other things got lost in this idea that he was just a controversial figure. And, you know, Robert was very, very polarizing. You know, people just saw him as a JLP actor. And so all the other work that he perhaps would have done, because you have to do other work here. You have other agencies and so on that fall under your ministry. So all the other work that he would have been doing you didn't hear much about them, because I think people were just stuck on him being, you know, coming from the JLP as the communication star, going into, he served for a while as junior minister for youth in the Ministry of Education Ministry of Education and Youth, and now as information minister, it didn't translate well.
And taking on even greater responsibility now, you think he has to have a sort of a different mindset to tackle these responsibilities?
I think he's a good minister, you know. I think it's just the communications part of it that didn't work. So I think, you know, one of the things I alluded to just now was that the job is more than just the press conference or speaking on the radio. It's an important part of it, but every minister has to content themselves with how they're engaging with the job that they're supposed to do, as it relates to setting the legislative agenda, ensuring that legislative agenda translates into sustainable policies and programs that people will benefit from. And so that part of the work was being done. But I don't think people were judging him on that. So I have no doubt that those skills will translate into work.
Okay.
And into developing a program that can see to the effective rollout of the Spark program, because I think the government's tenure hinges on the success of that program.
Okay. Do you also think, Dr. Spence, that this cabinet reshuffle might help the government address any challenges it might be facing then in terms of achieving its 2020 mandate?
I think one of the things that we've heard so often, Richie, in the press and from people who engage in this kind of reflection on the government's work over time and on a daily basis, is that this government has accomplished a lot. And there's so much celebration of their accomplishments in the international space from international organizations who are, you know, just speaking about Jamaica's, you know, economic stability and the sustainable growth and all of that, you know. We hear that Jamaica is in the best place it has been in over 40 years. We hear about those accomplishments, but somehow, at least before the last local government election, that didn't translate into the kind of votes that perhaps the JLP would have anticipated. So I think, you know, the conversations we were having before the local government election as analysts was, you know, is it that the JLP feels that people will automatically come on board if they hear that, and not recognizing that they need to do more of the hand-to-hand combat. They need to do more of the engaging in the streets, of talking to people. But not only that people have to see the success on their dinner table. People have to see the success manifested in their homes. And I think, I don't know if if this is more about, you know, getting people to see it and to understand and count perhaps the improvements in their daily lives, if they are seeing any, and communicating what the government is doing towards that. That's one. But also to understand that people have a serious problem with the infrastructure of the country, and the road for me is symbolic of that. It's not just the road that they have a problem with. They have a problem with public institutions and what seems to be the decay of public buildings, hospitals, schools, and so on. So they have a task now with, one, getting people to understand that the building of the macroeconomic stability and the stabilizing of the economy is going to lead to some other things going into their third term if they get the opportunity, and to also convince people that they will be faithful to the task of improving Jamaica for all Jamaicans. You know, they have a task with communicating that. So I think perhaps that the switch, you know, such that it is available without totally disrupting the government with 1 year out of an election, is what can be done at this time, but it is also two of the critical areas that we've seen emerge as areas that the government needs to shore up going into its last year in the term.
Yes. All right, we've been looking at the recent mini reshuffle of the Jamaican cabinet. My very special guest in the Big Story segment was Dr. Nadeen Spence, political analyst. Doc, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts. I wish you a wonderful day today.
Thank you. Same to you.
All right. Enjoy your day. Thank you so much, Dr. Spence. All right, there you have it. That was the big story for this morning. And as we told you, political commentator Dr. Nadeen Spence. I always love to listen to her, as I said earlier, and also to have a chat with her. And we got it done this morning. She was the first female guest in the Big Story segment, and we thank her once again.